Hello there, good morning. Man, hier sit ek alweer vanoggend and shoo, shoo, it's a thing of speaking those things that aren't as though they were. But more than that, it's a thing of walking in the things that aren't as though they were, believing in the things that aren't as though they were. That's where I'm sitting this morning. Is what do you believe? What are the voice or voices that you might be listening to? I know we sometimes think we hear many voices, but it can sometimes be the same one, and the noise that's all around makes it sound like different voices. What kind of belief do your actions show? That's what I'm sitting here with this morning, and I was reading out of Ezekiel chapter 37. I'm not quickly going to read it. It's Oh man, this is a big one. It's verse 1 through 10. And the hand of the Lord came upon me and brought me out in the spirit of the Lord, and set me down in the midst of the valley, and it was full of bones. Then he caused me to pass by them all around, and behold, they were very many in the open valley, and indeed they were very dry. And he said to me, Son of man, can these bones live? So I answered, O Lord, you know. Again he said to me, Prophesy to these bones, and say to them, O dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. Thus says the Lord God to these bones, Surely I will cause breath to enter into you, and you shall live. I will put sinews on you, and bring flesh upon you, cover you with skin, and put breath in you, and you shall live. Then you shall know that I am the Lord. So I prophesied as I was commanded. And as I prophesied, there was a noise, and suddenly a rattling, and the bones came together, bone to bone. Indeed, as I looked, the sinews and the flesh came upon them, and the skin covered them too. It covered them over. But there was no breath in them. Also he said to me, Prophesy to the breath. Prophesy, O Son of Man, and say to the breath, Thus says the Lord God, Come from the four winds, O breath, and breathe on these slain, that they may live. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and breath came into them, and they lived, and stood upon their feet, an exceedingly great army. Imagine God saying this kind of stuff to you. You looking at these things, these dry bones here, and God says, just speak life over them. You know, God told Ezekiel what to do, but look at what Ezekiel said. But look at also what God is asking Ezekiel. God is asking Ezekiel, can these bones live? And Ezekiel's answer, Lord, you know. We know God knows, don't we? Ezekiel knew it as well. He knew God knew whether those bones could live. But then what happens? God told Ezekiel, speak life over these things. Speak these words. These are the words that you need to speak. Speak it so that they may live. God needed Ezekiel to believe it. And then he needed Ezekiel to apply action to his beliefs, to speak it, to walk in the belief of knowing that God can bring those dry bones to life. Not only any action, but applying the action that God instructed, as he commanded me. I said to these bones, as God commanded me, following the command of the Lord, following the action God told him to do, to the T, every word, exactly like God told him to say it. And he did. God needed him to, and he did believe enough to speak it. And then what happened? This army came up out of a whole valley of dry bones. An exceeding army, an exceedingly great army. That is groot. That sounds, I don't know about you, but that sounds very groot to me. That sounds like a massive amount. And I got a few questions that I had to write down here this morning. How many times in your life has God asked you if those dry bones in your life can live? How many times in your life has God asked you if your situation can turn out good? If your depression can be healed? if your stress can disappear, if your worries can vanish, where your shortages or your not enough can be more than enough. How many times has God asked you that? How are you answering that question? Are you answering like Ezekiel? Lord, you know. Or is that not your answer? Do you even have an answer? How many times in your life has God told you to speak life over those situations that you're in? To speak His life, the true life, over your depression and stress and worries and shortages or shortcomings. How many times has God needed you to believe? For you to believe it. Even if you are saying, Lord, you know. How many times has God needed you to believe? How many times has God called you to action it? To speak it? To walk in it? You know, I've learned in your life that your actions will always follow your beliefs. If you believe you are defeated, you will walk in defeat. King Saul believed that they couldn't defeat Goliath, and his idle actions showed it. They were idle, passive people for, I think, does the Bible say 40 days? It's been a while that they just sat there, and every day Goliath came out and screamed and shouted at them, going, who will you send to defeat me? And Saul believed they couldn't defeat him, so they did nothing. A king that does nothing. So it filtered through the ranks. Nobody did nothing because King Saul believed they were defeated. And then what happened? David pitched up. And David believed that God can defeat Goliath through him, and his actions showed it. He didn't only speak it, he actioned it. He got offended first, he went and got his stuff, he ran out, his actions showed it. Goliath laughed at him, and he said, you know what, you come to me with sword and spear, but I come to you in the name of the God of Israel. He spoke life, and he actioned it, and he defeated it. Your mouth will always follow your beliefs and your actions. If you believe you are defeated, you will walk in defeat, and your mouth will speak defeat. Your mouth will speak death. You know, the Bible calls us to choose life. Deuteronomy 30 says, I call heaven and earth as witnesses against you today, verse 19 and 20. I call heaven and earth as witnesses today against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore, choose life, that both you and your descendants may live, that you may love the Lord your God, that you may obey his voice, and that you may cling to him, for he is your life and the length of your days, and that you may dwell in the land which the Lord swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give them. Choose life. There's always, I feel every situation that's in front of us, there's always life and death. We need to choose. And it starts with the belief. It starts with the hope and the faith and the knowing. It starts with not leaning on your own understanding, but trusting in the Lord your God with everything that you have. You need a shift and a change at the core of your belief. And if you need to grow your level of belief, that's fine. Then start somewhere smaller. If your belief needs to grow, you can't necessarily start at the big ones. I'm not saying you can't at all. You can. God can do anything he wants, but he needs you to believe that he can. But start with something smaller. There's nothing wrong with starting in the beginning. Those big, bulky, buff, ripped dudes in the gym didn't start there, I'll tell you that. It took them time getting there. People who run marathons don't start getting up in the morning and just go run a marathon. They don't start there. It took practice, it took training. Guys lifting the heaviest weights in the world didn't start. The beast didn't start at lifting 500 kilogram world record deadlifts. He started smaller. He started 100 kgs, 50 kgs, 150 kgs. I don't know where they start these things. Start smaller if you need to. Train your way up. I've had times, recent times as well, where I had no money for food. And I didn't even know if or even how I was going to eat. Literally walking out of my front door in the morning on my way to the car to go to work and go, Lord, am I going to eat today? Am I going to have supper today, Lord? Am I going to have lunch today, Lord? Am I going to get to have lunch and supper today, Lord? Asking him literally that, it sounds stupid, I know. But I asked him because he's ultimately my provider. Because I know I don't have the financial means with what I see in my bank account, what I saw. I knew there was nothing. So I asked because he's the provider. If I wouldn't have eaten, then it would have been cool. If I didn't eat, cool, no problem. But one thing I can tell you is that a day didn't go by when that happened, when that was the occasion, when that was what happened. When that was the case, God provided every single time. Lunch, supper, both. But if it was just the one, it was enough. That's the best thing of it all. If I only had lunch any time of the day, it would have been enough. Well, it was enough. If I only had dinner, it was enough. Out of the blue, out of nowhere, people sometimes you don't even expect to. People you haven't spoken to in a bit, just going, hey, dude, let's catch up, come make a turn. But then it costs action afterwards. So I action, I already spoke. But I also asked a question in a way of life. I believe you can ask questions in a deathly way and in a lively way as well. Like, Lord, do I get to eat today? Not, oh Lord, I'm not going to eat today. Which one is the better way to ask, I think? Well, do you think actually, not me, I know. And why was it? And it was actually more than enough, the child that I did get to have. But I, for a moment, never believed that God wouldn't look after me and wouldn't provide. Why? Because He's a God that looks after His children. He says we are worth more than sparrows, and not even a sparrow worth a copper coin for a few would not fall to the ground without the will of your Father. And we are worth more than many sparrows. Because I know that the Lord is my shepherd and I shall not want. The God of the universe knows my name. And I am His son. You know, Proverbs 18 also says, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit. Whether you speak death, you will eat fruit there. If you speak life, you will eat fruit there. Choose life that God puts in front of you. And I know this might be a silly example in the end of the day, but it's a very real one, because being short on cash seems to be whatever is the going thing these days. Short on cash for whatever it is you need it for. It could be rent. Could be food like I had. Could be, I don't know, out of examples. But it's the stuff you need to get paid. It's the stuff you need to eat. It's the stuff you need to be able to stay. It's the deal you need to keep your job. But even in asking questions, you still, in that way that you ask the question, is a way of life or a way of death. And if you don't see a positive end to your current story, your current situation, your current position, you need to check again. You need to check your heart. You need to check your mind. You absolutely need to check your belief system. Might need an adjustment. It means something's holding you down. It doesn't mean you're being wrong or you're being an idiot or you're being, well, let's face it, we are idiots sometimes. Let's face it. Because we've been blinded by the lies of the enemy that tells us that God can't and God can. That's why we need that adjustment, that double check, that mirror conversation with godly life. You know, He's not the God of not enough. He's the God of more than enough. He's not the God of death. He's the God of life. He's not the God of lies. He's the God of truth. He's the God of the universe. He's the King of kings. He's the Lord of lords. And He knows your name. He knows how many hairs are on your head. He knows exactly where you are. Elroy, the God who sees me. He knows where you're sitting. He knows what you're facing. He knows what you're dealing with today. Right now, He knows what you're dealing with. He's there. And He's asking you, oh son, oh daughter of man, can these dry bones live? He knows what He can do. He knows what He wants to do in your life. He knows what He wants to do with you. He knows what He wants to do in you. He knows what He can do. He needs you to believe it. He needs you to action it. He needs you to speak it. He needs you to believe it. So I want to challenge you today to speak life over those dry bones in your life to become flesh. Call in the winds, the four winds of the earth. Call in the winds for the Lord to bring His breath over it, His breath of life over it. If you do that and you get your heart adjustment, you get your belief adjustment, you adjust your heart, follow His instruction. Call to life, speak life, and your situation will live.